Okay, first of all, I'd like to ask, how many people here are 80 years, and we'll admit it, 80 years or older? Okay. Well, I should have rephrased that. How many people, including me, are 80 years or older? Okay, so I want to take you back 80 years to start. 80 years back in Rockland. Now, for an outsider to come in and talk about Rockland, that's kind of dicey. But I'm a townie. I'm like a lot of you. I went to the stinking Lincoln, which used to be Rockland High School. And then I went to the McKinley, which used to be Rockland High School. Do you know that on the third floor of the McKinley, which no one could go there, Mr. Dunn, the principal, allowed me to go up there. There was a stuffed kangaroo in the attic of the McKinley School, which I often wonder when I go by if it's still there. And then I went to Rockland High School, graduated from Rockland High School, had no idea in the world ever to be a teacher. And somebody said, you know, you ought to, I had an engineering background, you should go over and sub. It was Vietnam time, and they weren't hiring engineers, and they were white. There was that big draft thing. So I came over and I substituted $14 a day. That was pretty good. And one thing led to another. And this is now year number 56 for me. So I've been teaching all those years, and I'm back in the classroom, and I absolutely love it. I'm in the alternative program called the SAIL program at Rockland High School, and they're my kids, and I'm the grandfather. I have the best job in the world. I'm grandfather to about 565. As I look around here, I see former colleagues, new friends from a podcast that Seth and I do, relatives that I have not seen for many years, and it's so good, and some of my students here as well. So it's so much fun to be here back in Rockland, and I'm going to take you back 80 years in Rockland, and I know some of us do remember back 80 years. Rockland's changed a lot. When I was younger, Rockland was a factory town everywhere. I can count at least 12 factories that were in Rockland. We made shoes. We made parachute harnesses. During World War II, we made parachutes for parabombs that they were using in the Pacific. That was done at Codman's. We were into all kinds of industry. Parts of shoes. One company made just the bottoms. One company made just the lasts. There were at least 12 factories in Rockland, and they were all busy. And I remember the day that World War II ended, and all the whistles were blowing at all the factories. And I remember that I was sitting up here by the town hall, which wasn't there then. There's a wall there. We were sitting on the wall, and all the whistles were blowing. And Rockland has changed a lot. It used to be a manufacturing town. Now it is a bedroom community. Now, those of you who know my colleague, Fred Damon, and now Fred's a little younger than I. Well, let's put it this way. Fred's mother and I graduated from Rockland High together. Fred says every time we would do a talk at Rockland High School on the history of Rockland, he would say Rockland's famous for three things: shoes, anybody else? Boats, and cymbals. And one of those factories is still in business. Zildjian Cymbal is still in business. But Boston Whaler is no longer located in Rockland, and the shoe industry is long gone. So I'm going to take you back. That's taking you back 80. I'm going to take you back another 45. But first, I have a grandson who has a sense of humor. He's also a second grade teacher in Brockton. Maybe he has to have a sense of humor to teach second grade. And he got this cup for me. And it's Lizzie. That's really not what Lizzie looked like. This is what Lizzie looked like. And she's welcoming you here tonight because she and I have been going together now for about 16 years. And she enjoys it when I tell her story because she thinks that she's been often maligned, she's been shunned, and many people think she was guilty. Didn't they hang Lizzie Borden? No, they haven't hung women in Massachusetts since the 1700s, but that's a whole nother story. Lizzie was acquitted for the crimes that she was charged. And I'm going to take you back to Fall River. And the year is 1892. And the time is 11 o'clock in the morning. And before that, before 11 o'clock in the morning, Lizzie Borden was just a normal person with a normal life. She traveled, made the grand tour of Europe, all the capitals. They left in June, they came back in November. Her and 5 other women from Fall River. A former teacher met them over there and was their guide as they went through the capitals of Europe. She worked for the board of directors on the Fall River Hospital. She was treasurer of the Ladies' Fruit and Flower Association. Anybody that's getting out of the hospital, they made sure they got fruit and flowers. She was heavily involved in a church, which was not the same church that her mother and father went to. That was suspicious to the police department. So back then, people were expected to be and remain in their own lane. And Lizzie didn't. Lizzie wasn't married. That was suspicious. Lizzie was involved. She, in the church that she was involved with, she taught immigrant children. She taught Sunday school. And because she didn't go to the same church, congregational church, but it was a different congregational church. It was the one on Rock Street, not the First Congregational Church of Fall River. That was suspicious. So before 11 o'clock, she had a normal life. After 11, her life changed forever. And it all goes down to what happened on that day. They tell you this is the hottest day of the year. Oh, what a hot day it was. Terribly hot day. It wasn't. All you got to do is look in the newspapers, and there were 3 daily newspapers in Fall River at that time. Fall River was a big city in Massachusetts, one of the largest cities. About 92,000 people. About the same as it is today. They had a police department of 125 men and 2 matrons. Not police women, matrons. Got to stay in your lane, you know. So on that day in August, the 4th, it was a Thursday. It was just a normal day. And if you have read my book or look at it online, or you'll see in the back there is a whole bunch of clocks and it tells you where everybody was at a certain time. Where was everybody at 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m., and the movement of the people within the house. And that kind of explains what happened. So let's talk about, we'll talk about Lizzie. She's looking at you. Lizzie had 2 sisters. Everybody thinks she only had 1 sister, but there were 3 Borden sisters. Lizzie only knew her older sister. Emma was the oldest. And then about 5 years later, Alice was born. And Alice died before she was 2 years old. That was not uncommon in 1892 for children to suffer from all kinds of things like measles and all kinds of maladies that we don't even think about these days. But Alice died in 1858, and Lizzie was born in 1860. So she never knew her middle sister. And not too long after that, within 2 years, the first Mrs. Borden, Sarah, passed away. Of natural causes, they say something from the 1800s, what we would diagnose today probably as bladder cancer. She was 39 years old. So Mr. Borden, at the time, and I'll give you a look at him. This is how he dressed, by the way, in the summertime. Going downtown to look over his establishments and his businesses and things like that, he dressed like this. Now, this is not wool, this is cotton. It's called a sack coat. Yeah, his pants are frayed a little bit like mine. Why would I not wear these? They're perfectly good. And so did he. And because of that, people called him a miser. Oh, you know, he didn't even have electricity. No one else did. Electricity had not come to Fall River yet. So Mr. Borden married when he was 23 years old. His wife, Sarah, was a year younger. They had the 3 children. This is what Mr. Borden looked like about a year before his passing. Note the resemblance. So here he is. He's a widower. He's 40 years old. He has 2 children. One's 12 and one's 2.5. Lizzie was 2.5 years old when her mother passed away. And he was a widower for a year plus, almost a year and a half. And he married a lady by the name of Abby. And this is Abby. Abby was a spinster. Do you guys know what that is? She's 38 years old. She wasn't married. Boy, she lucked out, everybody said. She married Mr. Borden. But she also had an adolescent and a toddler to take care of. Abby Borden was the only mother that Lizzie ever knew. She did not remember her birth mother, and these 2 people were slain within an hour and a half of each other, not at the same time, and within an hour and a half of each other. In the morning, somewhere between 9 and 11, on August 4th, and that was in, when? On the clock, 1892. And not only did it become the crime of the year down there, it became the crime of the century. Newspapers from all over the United States sent reporters to Fall River to report on this crime. Well, there were a lot of suspects. Heavens forbid. Like Rockland, Fall River was a factory town, only it was a factory city. There were 130 plus mills in Fall River in 1892. It was called Spindletown. Towns and cities were named often for their industry. What do they call Brockton? Shoetown. They used to call Rockland Shoetown too. At one time, the football team in Rockland was known as the Shoes before they became the Bulldogs. What do they call Taunton? Everybody know what they call Taunton? Silver City, right? Because all the silver companies down there. New Bedford, or as we call it, New Bedford and Fall Reeve. New Bedford was a whaling town. So all these large cities were identified with the industry. Now, if you take the road, heaven forbid, not 24, my word, talk about accidents. If you take Route 24 south and you get off that first exit, don't go all the way down past the ponds, take that first exit to Fall River, and it comes around and you see this beautiful bay out there, and you say, wow, what a beautiful lake. Well, that's not a lake, that's salt water. And you go a little bit further, and there's this great big battleship sitting there, the USS Massachusetts. It's a saltwater port. And that's what made Fall River the attractive thing that it was. They were able to ship in raw goods and export thread, yarn, fabric, and that's what Fall River did. And they had a lot of different people there, a lot of diversity, like Jacques from Montreal, and Mario and his family from Salerno in Italy. Tony Cabral. I don't know, I can't remember where Tony came from. I worked with him at Brockton High School. It was either the Azores or Portugal. And so it was a very, very diverse population. There were a lot of people from the South. There were people who came from the South whose parents were slaves, who were working in the mills at Fall River. And on the 4th of August, they were all suspects because they were all different. And everybody wondered, could it be them? Could it be her? Could it be him? But it didn't take the Fall River Police Department. And I have a picture of them somewhere here, a handsome looking group. Let me just see if I can get everything together here. Here they are. There they are. That's not all of them. That's a lot of them. 125 members of the Fall River Police Department. They had to be because it was a large city. So the word went out. Something's happened at the Borden's house. And guess who discovered Mr. Borden? Mr. Borden was slain secondly, but discovered first. Who do you think discovered Mr. Borden's body laying in the sitting room on the first floor? Anybody? Lizzie. Guess who sent Bridget Sullivan? And I'm not going to make this mistake like I did on a podcast. I called her Bridget Monahan. I have a relative named Bridget Monahan. And I made the mistake and called Bridget Monahan rather than boy, did I hear about that. And so Bridget Sullivan was the domestic servant. She didn't do any cleaning upstairs, only on the first floor and the cooking chores. Lizzie said, something's happened to Father. Run across the street, see if Dr. Bowen's home. Now, Dr. Bowen is a big person, a big witness in this whole case. He lived directly across the street. Now, they lived on 2nd Street. There is no 1st Street. There's never a 1st Street in the town. Main Street was the 1st street, and then 2nd Street was the next one over. And it was a mixed use because in 1892 you could do that. It was not in a rundown, dumpy neighborhood as often reported. The Bordens formerly lived on Ferry Street, but in 1872, Mr. Borden decided he wanted to upgrade. He bought an existing 2-family house and converted it to a 1-family house, which is just the opposite of how things happen these days. So he made it into a 1-family house, and you can tell it was 2-family because there's a stairway at the front and also one at the back. That was indicative of two family houses. They had two stairways. And Lizzie got up. She was the last one to get up. And what did she have for breakfast? The gentleman up back with the hat. What did Lizzie have for breakfast? Sugar cookies and coffee. And we have some sugar cookies up here, by the way. And that was about 9 o'clock. Everybody else in the family had already was up. Bridget was up and made breakfast. They had a house guest overnight. A relative of both Lizzie and Emma, their uncle. He was Sarah Borden. That was the first Mrs. Borden. It was her brother. And he left Fall River when he was about 15 years old, and that would have been about 1855. And he went out west, Illinois, and then finally into Iowa, Hastings, Iowa area. And he became both into cattle and into horses. And he and Mr. Borden got in business together. This was one of Mr. Borden's sidelines. Mr. Borden was not one of the Bordens in Fall River that had money. He earned it all. Now, you heard of families in Fall River, the Boyntons, the Durfees, the Braytons, and the Bordens, and they all had a lot of controlling interest in the businesses of Fall River. Mr. Borden's father was a fishmonger. If those of you who know what a fishmonger is, those of you who go way back, to be my age, my mother-in-law ran a fish market over in Abington called the Old Town Fish Market that she ran with her 4 daughters and then a younger son. And she was a fishmonger. She sold fish. So Mr. Borden didn't come for money. What money he made himself. The first thing he did was he went in business. He went in business with a guy named Bill Almy. And I'm going to read what Mr. Borden did because I don't want to miss anything. Just to show you how somebody from the son of a fishmonger, how far he went. Whoa, this has wheels on it, doesn't it? Okay. He went into business with Mr. Army, and they were in the furniture making business. Tables, chairs, dresser drawers, things like that. Because it was made out of wood, they made other things that are made out of wood, like caskets and coffins. Now, if any of you remember the film back from the 1970s with Elizabeth Montgomery playing the role of Lizzie Borden, it indicates that Mr. Borden was an undertaker, that he did this in the cellar, that he embalmed in the cellar. That is absolutely fiction. He was not an embalmer. Back then, almost all funerals were from the home. Not a funeral home, the home. And what Mr. Borden did, he would rent you whatever you needed, a table, a stand, the things to hang flowers on, all of those things that were made out of wood. He would take care of those and he would rent them to you. So, and that business started during the Civil War and operated right up until about 1870, 1871. And he got another partner, interesting enough, they were in the furniture business. Who's he get for another partner? A guy named Wood, Theodore Wood. And they operated. Army eventually left, and Mr. Borden had the business and continued with that. Now we had some other things cooking. Real estate, investments. From 1870s to 1892, he became wealthy because of his rental properties and businesses and other partners that he had, other partnerships. He was involved in banking. He was involved in mill work. And I'll give you an idea. He was director of the Merchants Manufacturing Company, board director, director of the Globe Yarn Company, director of the Troy Cotton and Woolen Manufacturing Company. He was into banking. And now that I've got my pages all messed up, he was president of the Union Savings Bank. He was on the board of directors. He was on the board of directors of the First National Bank of Fall River. He was a director of the Durfee Safe Deposit and Trust Company. So he was involved in banking. He was involved in mills. He was on the board of directors. And when he passed away, he was worth, they estimated, in excess of $500,000. In today's dollars, that would be roughly between $13 and $18 million. That might be a reason for wanting Mr. Borden deceased, but maybe not. So he was extremely successful, and he was a self-made man. This was not Borden money that he inherited. Both he and his wife came from poorer families, and he did it the hard way, by hard work. So on the morning of the 4th, and somebody's got to keep track of time for me, okay? It's 6:30. So I'm on a strict clock, and so we're going to move right along. Don't want to introduce him yet. So we have Lizzie, and I'm going to put Lizzie here because she wants to show you that she's watching. Now, that's a great picture for 1890. You got to remember, photography was only about 50 years old. That's a professionally done picture. And you can imagine who paid for that. He wasn't a miser. He wasn't cheap, not Mr. Borden. Mr. Borden sent Emma. This is Emma. This is an earlier picture, and you can see the quality is nowhere near what the quality of Lizzie's picture is. Now, he sent Emma to private school. Here's a quick story about one of our podcasts. I said in a podcast that Emma went to Wheaton Seminary School for Women, and that's what it was called back then. And I made the mistake of calling it a finishing school. Oh, did I hear about that? In no uncertain terms. I was told that Wheaton Seminary School and Mount Holyoke was formed by the same woman, and it was not a finishing school. It was a prodigious and important school for women. This is the same Wheaton that's over in Norton. So Mr. Borden sent Emma to Wheaton. He sent Lizzie to Europe. They weren't neglected like some say as a rationale for murder. So we have these two sisters, and we have the two victims. And the two victims, of course, were Mr. Borden and Mrs. Borden, both in their 60s. Mr. Borden was almost about a month shy of his 70th birthday. Mrs. Borden was a little bit younger. And they had lived at the address at 92 2nd Street. If you look it up on GPS, it's not 92 anymore because they changed the numbers. But the address that they go by is 92 2nd Street. And they had lived there for about 20 years. It did have running water. They put water into Fall River, city water into Fall River in the 1870s. Mr. Borden was one of the first to have it. People say, yeah, but they didn't have toilets. Well, they did. But the toilet at that time was called a water closet, and it was down in the basement, in the cellar, because the house was constructed with a privy out back. Anybody remember what a privy is? I hate to say it. When we moved from Custer Street in Rockland to North Avenue, 3 houses down from Holy Family School, there was a privy out back, a 2-seater. And we weren't there a month, and my father said, that's gotta go. There was a bathroom in the house, but the privy never got torn down. So there was a privy at 92 Second. It was attached to the barn, but had not been used in 20 years. Yes, they looked to see if there were any weapons in the privy. So these 2 people got up on the 4th. Mrs. Borden was the 3rd one up. Mr. Borden was the 4th. The house guest that came the night before. And I might as well introduce him because he's a big important part of this. This is Uncle John. Uncle John Moss. Lizzie says, I'm thirsty. Thank you, Lizzie. Uncle John Moss arrived the day before. Remember, he and Mr. Borden were in business together. He had come back about 3 years earlier, 1889, 1890, from Iowa. And he lived over closer to New Bedford, Westport. And that's where he worked. But he also had the side-going business with Mr. Borden about bringing cattle and horses from Iowa to Swansea. Swansea's the next town over from Fall River on the other side of the bay. And Mr. Borden had a farm there. And Mr. Morse would occasionally visit the Bordens, talk about what was going on the farm, discuss how business was, and it had been a rough year. It had been a hot summer, earlier in the summer. And hot summers meant you lost animals coming from Iowa by rail through Chicago to Massachusetts. They had to hire a couple of guys they called cowboys to go with the cattle and the horses when they shipped them by rail. Somebody had to feed them, somebody had to water them, somebody had to muck out the cars. And things were not going well because they'd lost quite a few animals. There was a particular incident right before the death of Mr. Borden that he and John Moss discussed heatedly. And that was the fact that a foal was born somewhere between Iowa and Swansea. And the horse got off the train with the foal, and the guy said, I want to buy that foal. How much is it? $30. He gave him the $30, and they said, we can't take it now because it's still with the mother. Why don't you pick it up in about 3 weeks? And he did, and when he came to pick it up, the foal evidently got stepped on, and it had a limp. And the gentleman wanted his money back. Well, that did not make Mr. Borden happy. They returned the money. Mr. Borden said at that time, this was the night before the murders, maybe we ought to consider wrapping up this business arrangement that we've been having for the last 15 or 20 years. And it got a little bit heated, as it was stated, as heard by Lizzie and others. And so the evening ended. Mr. Moss went to the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor. Emma went, anybody know? Fairhaven. I know some people say Fairhaven, but we know we say Fairhaven. So she is out of the picture. She's over here in Fairhaven. She's been there for 2 weeks. She's still a suspect, but she's in Fairhaven. So now all that's left in the house is Mr. Moss, Mr. and Mrs. Borden, Lizzie, and the one person I haven't introduced yet, and that would be Bridget Sullivan. Bridget Sullivan was from Ireland, 26 years old, came over here by herself when she was a teenager, was a domestic servant, worked in hotels down in Newport, and had been with the Borden family for approximately 2 years. As I said, she only did cooking and cleaning on the first floor. Everybody else was responsible for their bedroom. She had a bedroom on the third floor, which we would call the attic. Had one window, and that's where Bridget's accommodations. Now, on the day of the tragedy, Mrs. Borden told Bridget, I would like the outside windows washed. And she complied and got a bucket and a mop and started washing the outside windows. Mr. Borden went around and checked out all of his businesses downtown. He was having a brand new building, the Borden Block, still there, National Register of Historic Sites. That was being built. He stopped there, see how they were doing, stopped at several banks, got home around 10:30. Came in, brought the mail. Lizzie said, how you doing? He said, well, he hadn't been feeling well. Something they ate. Mrs. Borden thought maybe they'd been poisoned. They hadn't, got to remember, no refrigeration, just an ice box back then. And maybe some of you have heard that story about that mutton stew. That didn't happen either. It wasn't bad stew that had been on the stove for 3 days. The doctor, Dr. Bowen, who's their across the street neighbor, he diagnosed it as just a stomach bug from unrefrigerated or not adequately refrigerated food. So Mr. Borden lays down on the sitting room. Bridget finishes her windows. She goes up to the third floor, lay down before she comes down to start preparing the dinner/lunch midday meal. And Lizzie is out back and goes into the barn. Lizzie's going to go on a fishing trip next week, and she's looking for some lead sinkers. And so she went to the loft in the barn and was looking for them. And just then, the City Hall clock starts chiming. Much like my podcast co-host up back's clock chimes on the hour. 11 strikes. And Lizzie heard it and came downstairs from the loft of the barn, went in the house. She gathered pears that were at the pear tree and washed them in the sink. They did have running water, both upstairs and down, and then peeked in to see how her father was doing. She says she had removed his shoes to make him more comfortable. And this is a clue. And she looks in from behind and she sees that Mr. Borden is mortally wounded, all in the head, mostly on one side. And she yells upstairs to the third floor, Bridget, come quick, something's happened to Father. Run across the street, get Dr. Bowen. So Dr. Bowen, where'd you go, Doc? Dr. Bowen is not home. His wife said, he's on rounds today. So Bridget runs back and says, no Dr. Bowen. So she says, go for help. With that, the next door neighbor, who was the former mayor's daughter, Mrs. Churchill, she says, what's the matter, Lizzie? Something's happened to Dad. And so She comes over. Just then, guess who comes home? You got it. Horse and buggy. Dr. Bowen. Doesn't even go in the house. Grabs his little satchel, runs across the street, takes one look at Mr. Borden and declares him deceased. Then they start asking, has anybody seen Mrs. Borden? And nobody had. There was rumor that she had gone to visit a relative. She had a sister that lived 2 streets over. There was supposedly was a note. Nobody could find the note. Who said she went to visit the relative? Well, Lizzie did. But so did Bridget. And that was about at 11:15, 11:20, when Dr. Bowen said, get a sheet. And they covered up Mr. Bowen. So Bridget and Lizzie's best friend, Alice Russell, they decided to look around, and they go upstairs and look into the guest bedroom where John Moss had spent the evening, and they thought they saw something. It looks like somebody's on the floor on the other side of the bed. Dr. Bowen went up, took a look, another victim. So what do you got? You got 2 victims and no police. Why? They went to Rhode Island. That was the annual picnic. Anybody here from Rhode Island? You remember Rocky Point? Of course you do. Annual picnic. A lot of the police department, retired and active, took the steamer from Fall River down to Rocky Point. The chief is short-handed. The Bordens did not have a telephone. Hardly anyone had a telephone. So the next door neighbor, the ex-mayor's daughter, runs over to this local stable, and she said, something's happened to Mr. Borden. Can somebody contact the police? And there was a guy by the name of John Cunningham there. He was a newspaper distributor, sold newspapers, but he wanted to be a newspaper reporter. He said, I'll tell the police. So he ran the full length of 2nd Street, and on the corner of 2nd and, you guessed it, Borden Street, there was a paint store that also sold wallpaper. They had a telephone. So he ran in, he says, I need to use the phone. It looked like it was about 11:15. The guy said, go ahead. Guess who he called? Well, that's my cousin Dean. Guess who he called? Who would you think? The cops, of course. No. He called the newspapers. Not 1, not 2, but 3 newspapers. Fall River had 3 daily newspapers. Fall River had 5 weekly newspapers, foreign language. This shows you what the diversity of Fall River was at that time. So the 4th call he made to Marshal Hilliard, the chief of police, and he said, something's happened at the Borden house. Send somebody quick. And the chief said, who? So he took the only person that was available, who was a booking officer, who was described as 54 years old and rather rotund. And he, his words, ran to the Borden house, which was approximately a 1/4 mile away. And what's the first thing that a police officer does when he arrives on the scene? Checked his clock. It was 11:25. And he noted that. Knocked at the door. Who answered the door? No. 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 Of course not. Who answered the door? Dr. Bowen. Said, come on in. So the police officer took one look at Mr. Borden and said, I got to let the chief know. So Dr. Bowen says, I've got to let Emma know. But he didn't tell her what happened. He sent her a telegram, said, emergency, you got to come back from, where is she? Fairhaven, right. So Dr. Bowen still got his buggy out front. He gives the police officer a ride back. He goes to the chief. He says, we got problems. We got a dead body. It's Mr. Bowen. And so now the chief tries to get some help. And there were police officers on duty, but not as many as usual. So it took a while before the police got there. And the reporters got there before most of the police. They were allowed to come in and view the body, and then the second body after they found Mrs. Borden. One guy came in, he said, hey, I sold this house back to Mr. Borden 20 years ago. Oh, come on in. Seth and I are colleagues at Rockland High School, and we do a crime podcast together. And almost every crime that we investigate, what's the final thing? Preservation of evidence, all the way up to now, all the way up to the Karen Reed case. Preservation of evidence is so important. And they were letting strangers come through the house. So it was pretty messed up. There were a lot of suspects, maybe about 40. Anybody who had an accent, anybody who had looked different, anybody who had a history of drinking, anybody who had PTSD from the Civil War. Mike, Yankee Mike, oh yeah, he could have been him. How about those two cowboys that came from Iowa with the horses? Yeah, they're staying in town, could be them. So there was a long list of suspects, but within a short period of time, the police decided that there was only one. And that one person is looking at you right there. And why did they suspect? One police officer said, Lizzie, I know you've gone through a lot. I need to ask you some questions. How about if I come back tomorrow? And she said, no, that's fine. I'll answer your questions right now. That's suspicious. She's not married, you know. She's 32 years old. That's suspicious. She doesn't go to the same congregational church that her mother and father do. The church that she was brought up in. Can you imagine? She didn't go to the church that she was brought up in. That's suspicious. So pretty soon, they narrowed their list from about 40 down to one. Now, it could have been anybody, but the list is short. She was in the house. It obviously wasn't murder-suicide. That's out of the question. And he was in the house. So they asked him his alibi. He said, well, I was visiting friends up on Y. Bossett Street. He was 59 years old at the time. And he was Lizzie's uncle, Emma's uncle. He was closer to Emma. Emma and he used to write. Lizzie, no. So he spent the night and he was in the house. And so was Bridget. And so there we have 3 possible suspects. And the police said, where were you, Bridget? Well, I was upstairs and I got through cleaning the windows and they looked pretty good. And I decided to lay down a little bit before lunch. Oh, okay. And where were you? Well, I was visiting my relatives. You can go up and check on Y. Bossett Street. Sure enough, an officer by the name of Bill Medley went up to Y. Bossett Street, knocked at the door. Could somebody knock on the door up back there, please? Thank you very much. Mrs. Emery comes to the door. Hi, can I help you? Yeah, we're checking the alibi of of a John Moss. Do you know John Moss? Oh yeah, he's related to me. Was he here today? Yeah, he was here today. Oh, I have a niece and she's here from Minnesota and he came to visit and, but she's ill. And he said, well, did your niece see him? Oh yeah. And what time did he leave? Well, I'm not really sure. It might have been around 11. Yeah, maybe it was 11:30. Could have been earlier. Oh, so the police writes that down, and that's good for an alibi. So Mr. Medley leaves. Officer Medley leaves. And right behind him, there's another knock at the door. Thank you. And who is it? A reporter from the Fall River Herald. He said, hey, wasn't that Officer Medley? Yeah. What do you want? Well, he was checking on the whereabouts of my relative, John Moss. What'd you tell him? Well, I told him he was here. Well, back then, being in the newspaper is like being on social media now, right? Everybody wants to be on social media. You don't believe it? Ask my students. Everybody wants to be on social media. Everybody wants to be on television. And once she got going, she couldn't stop. So she tells this reporter, he was here, and he left. And my niece is ill, and we sent for the doctor, and the doctor came to visit. Guess what doctor it was? That one, Dr. Bowen. And the reporter said, did they see each other? And she said, no, I don't think so. But Mr. Moss was leaving right about the same time the Dr. Bowen arrived. Alibi shot. Because we all know where Dr. Bowen was at 11:25. Because when the first police officer arrived, that's who he saw at the Borden house. And he'd been there for about 10 minutes. So when Uncle John says he left about 20 past 11 and arrived, and he was out back wandering around, not noticing that anything was going on in the house, and finally moseyed in about 1:15. But he became a witness for the prosecution. You know what that means? No more questions. They never asked him another question. They never asked, and Dr. Bowen was a witness, but they never asked him about Wybosset Street. They never had Mrs. Emery as a witness. Another witness for the prosecution, this one. She moved out on August 4th, 1892, the day of the murders, the afternoon. She moved out for good. You want to guess who helped her move? This guy helped her move. They both testified against Lizzie. Lizzie was in court. The case was in court 4 times. Lizzie was in court in a type of court 3 times. First time was an inquiry. Everybody know what an inquiry is? In Massachusetts, did a crime take place? So they get together with a district attorney and a judge, and they hear evidence, and Lizzie testified, but she was rather contradictory in that. And what they did, I didn't learn the first time that this has wheels. God. So, what they didn't know was that Dr. Bowen said, take this Pepto-Bismol. She was in shock, lost both her father and her stepmother, and so he prescribed this Pepto-Bismol, and that didn't seem to work. So he said, well, take this 8 grains of morphine. We don't use that measurement anymore, but 8 grains of morphine would look like 1.5 adult aspirins, not the 81 milligram, the larger adult aspirins. So then he said, take as needed, and he upped the dosage to 16. So she's in the following week, she's in the inquiry, and she's taking 16 grains. That's 3 aspirin-sized tablets of morphine as needed. And some of her answers were kind of contradictory. She wasn't sure. She was mixed up. That's good enough for us. Meanwhile, these 2 birds are testifying against her. Oh, there was bickering in the family. They were arguing. Can anybody here say that in the last year there hasn't been either bickering or argument in their family? It just, that's family. And because they were bickering, and because Lizzie did not call her mom, she called her Mrs. Borden, that doesn't mean that she's guilty of murder. So, inquiry takes place. Lizzie says, I want my attorney. And the judge says, no, you can't have an attorney. This is my court. No attorney, only the district attorney. That's for me. And this is what the law was. And this is how it went in Massachusetts. Guess when it changed? I'll give you the year. See if you can guess what the case was. 1969. It's the year man went to the moon. Anybody remember a famous case that year? Seth and I covered it on a podcast. Happened here in Massachusetts. Happened down the Cape. Happened off of Martha's Vineyard. Chappaquiddick. Everybody remember Chappaquiddick? Chappaquiddick, first thing they did, they had an inquiry. Did a crime happen? Well, yeah, kind of. There was a dead girl in the back seat of his car. You know what Senator Kennedy said? I want my lawyer. And the judge said, no, in Massachusetts, we do it the judge's way. And this judge says, I don't want any lawyers other than the district attorney. I don't want any press either. And Ted Kennedy was an attorney, and he also had some good attorneys. And they said, appeal. They appealed it to the Massachusetts Supreme Court, and guess what? You can have an attorney with you in an inquiry. Of course you can. They're asking you questions about a crime you're being accused of. But Lizzie didn't have that opportunity. She never testified again. She went to the preliminary hearing the end of August. Of course, grand jury, usually somebody in her position, being the accused, would not testify at a grand jury. They almost did not get enough information at the grand jury to indict her. But they got her old friend Alice Russell, and she said, I was there on Sunday and Lizzie burned a dress. They had looked at all the dresses on Thursday, on Friday. The funeral was on Saturday. The funeral was open casket, by the way, from the Borden home. And it wasn't a funeral procession as much as it was a parade. Up 2nd Street, left on Borden, right on Main, all the way down. People following this assemblage headed for Oak Grove Cemetery. It was a spectacle. And so Lizzie never testified at the preliminary hearing, and she did not testify when she went to court in June. She was held at the Hodges Street Jail, which is in Taunton, commonly called the Bristol County House of Correction and Jail. In Massachusetts, a lot of you who are Massachusetts probably recognize that. I tell my kids in school that I was in jail for 6 years. And that's true. But I got to go home at night because I was the teacher there. But in Massachusetts, we have House of Correction. That's where sentenced prisoners, usually low time, 5-year sentences or less, or let's say you had a 20-year sentence and it got down to 5, then they would move you to a House of Correction, which is lower security and closer to home, because these people are finally going to get out and they're going to be needing work and things like that, so they try to get them closer to the family. And then there is the jail. And the jail is where people who are being held can't make bail, escape risk, and a whole lot of other reasons. And that's where they held Lizzie. They had a female section. Lizzie spent most of her time in the warden's quarters because she became friendly with the warden's wife and continued to be friendly with the warden's wife after she was acquitted. It took about 2 hours, all male jury. Anybody know why the jury was all male? Women could not be on a jury. They could be witnesses for a crime, but they could not be on a jury. So after 2.5 hours, 2 hours, they came back with a not guilty, and Lizzie was released. And the debate has gone on for the last 134 years. There's people who, when I speak, they're vehement. You're wrong. She did it. I know she did it. Nobody knows. The evidence to me shows that this gentleman, I hit him, didn't I? Maybe I should give you a little more background. I said he worked in New Bedford, and he worked at the Davis Meat Market. His occupation was a butcher. He'd been a butcher for 40 years. A butcher butcher's not the guy at Trukey's. The butcher back then did the whole job, rendered the whole animal, carried his implement with him, which if you look, almost looks like a hatchet of some type. He wore a cummerbund made out of leather, which most butchers did, because if you were walking down the street and somebody said, "Hey, I need something butched," he was all ready. He had his implement with him. He had his cummerbund that he unrolled that went from here to his feet. And this is why he did not have any blood on him. Lizzie had none on there. The movie with Elizabeth Montgomery kind of suggests that she murdered them in the nude. You wouldn't do that in 1892. That's pure Hollywood. So that's Lizzie's tale. I believe that the evidence shows, and I'll be giving you a piece of paper that has both sides of the evidence. William Medley, his exact words, spelling errors and all, on one side. And on the other side is the report from the Fall River Herald, which was on the 5th of August. Now, how did I find out that from the Fall River Herald? By accident. I bought a book when I was researching this case. This case was researched for another publication that I was worked on, and you'll see on the book that it says Rich Little, that would be me, and Bev Falstad. Well, Bev Falstad, it was my co-author, and she wrote Lizzie's point of view throughout the book. And she lives in Alberta, Canada, and recently got out of the hospital. And she and I have never met. We met on a writer's blog. She was interested in doing a book. We worked on this project called The Innocence of It All, and the Lizzie Borden case was one of the ones that was in that. And we expanded that and made a full novel out of it, historical novel. And to me, the evidence shows, I was saying, so I bought this book as a reference book by a guy by the name of Robello. It is the Bible for Lizzie, and it's kind of pricey now. And when it came, the guy sent me a little note. He said, this book belonged to my father. He was a Lizzie Borden fanatic. Here's a set of pictures that he had, graphic pictures of the skulls as they were shown in court. They literally brought the skulls. They removed the skulls from the bodies, buried the remainder of the bodies that kept the skulls, cleaned them by boiling, and brought them into court as evidence. And the wounds are almost identical, except one's on the left and one's on the right. And he said, and I found this newspaper. And it was the Fall River Herald, the 5th of August, 1892, the day after. And in that newspaper had this article about the reporter going to White Bossett Street and talking to Lydia Emery. And she said, well, Dr. Bowen and my cousin were here at the same time. I don't know if they saw each other. Well, that really destroyed Mr. Morse's alibi, but they never asked him because he was a witness to the prosecution. So that's the case, and that's where I'm going to let it rest. And now it's time for questions. Yes?
How did you get interested in this?
Good question. I, like everyone else, heard the poem, the jump rope poem. Lizzie Borden took an axe, you know it all, gave her mother. When she saw what she had done. Right. First of all, it's all wrong. It could not be an axe, because the axe you'd have to swing like that, and that would hit the ceiling at 92. It was not her mother, it was her stepmother. And it wasn't 40, someone was more gentle than that, it was only 18. And it wasn't 41 for the father, it was only 10 that they could determine from the autopsy. And my daughter got interested in that, and for my birthday one year, she said, let's go visit the Lizzie Borden house. Well, for years, you couldn't get into it. It was a print shop. There was a print shop attached right to it. But back in the early 90s, somebody decided they were going to make a place that you could visit. And so we went through and we went on the whole tour and saw all the rooms and saw the pictures of the crime scene. This is one of the first crimes in America that was photographed. The Fall River Police Department had a photographer. He did not work for the police department, but was a professional photographer, take pictures. And when he took pictures of Mr. Borden, laying recumbent on this settee, he had his shoes on. And Lizzie had told the police that she had removed his shoes. Well, that's a clue. She must have done that. She must be responsible for killing him. However, in retrospect, back in 1892, no respectable gentleman, dead or alive, would ever want to be photographed with his feet showing. The photographer, out of kindness, out of courtesy to Mr. Bowen, slipped his shoes back on before he took the crime scene photo. Yet, that was a clue to the police that, she said she removed them, but there's the picture. Well, you have to judge for yourself. Lizzie's calling me again. One more sip. Interestingly enough, the box that came in is much more interesting than the cup itself. It's got the house on 2nd Street in its beautiful green. And the other question, yes?
Did you say that one of the victims was hit on one side of the head and the other victim on
Yes.
the other?
One is on the left and one is
So
on the
was
right.
that from behind, one of them from behind?
And initially, Mrs. Borden, it was indicated the first blow that struck her was face to face. She was face to face with her killer, and it hit her here. And she rolled, and she was in between the dresser and the bed, and the remaining strikes came from the back on this side here. Mr. Borden was hit on the opposite side. He was laying recumbent and was struck from behind. Yes.
So Rich, talk a little bit about different time of death for each one. What was the gap there, and how does your suspect's visit with his relatives fit in with the time frame of each murder?
That's a great question. Somebody said, and maybe you've heard this story about poison before. Somebody said, maybe these people weren't butchered with a hatchet or an axe. Maybe they were poisoned, and then somebody beat them with an axe to make it look like that. And so they decided to do an initial autopsy. Now, contrary to popular belief, it was not done on the dining room table. It was done in the dining room, but it was done on an undertaker's table. Mr. Borden was in the other room. There were 8 doctors. I do not know why you need 8 doctors to do 2 autopsies, but everybody wanted to get in on the show. Everybody who was a doctor got invited, including the mayor. The mayor was one of the attending physicians for the initial autopsy because he was a doctor. So somebody said, what about this poison deal? Well, let's find out. They removed the stomachs from both, put them in glass jars, tied them off, put them in glass jars, wax sealed it, gave it to a courier, onto the train, headed to Boston, brought them to Harvard, and they examined the contents of the 2 stomachs. They knew from Bridget that they had breakfast at about 7:15 in the morning, and everyone ate together. Mr. Morse, Mrs. Borden, Mr. Borden, and they said if they both ate together, let's look at the contents, and they did. And Mr. Borden's contents, which included Johnny cakes, coffee, perhaps a little fruit, had more digestion to the contents than Mrs. Borden, which indicated to them that Mrs. Borden was slain first. This is a Dr. Weber from Harvard, estimated that the difference in times between the 2 digestions is approximately 1.5 to 2 hours difference in time of death. Now, how that fits in with White Bossett Street, Uncle John said he arrived at White Bossett Street at about 9:30, went to the post office first because he had to mail a card to somebody, but couldn't remember to whom. Then he went to his relatives and says that he arrived at about 9:30 to 10 o'clock. So
that would suggest that she was killed before he left.
And then he came back.
And did
Yes.
Mr.
Yep.
Borden. Okay.
Right. Mr. Borden returned from the town from visiting his businesses at 10:30. Right. So he returned at 10:30.
I've been to the house also, and I think it's kind of small. So, what's your take on how could Lizzie have been there that whole 2 hours and never saw or heard anything before, during, or after the murders?
Okay, murder number 1. That would have been Mrs. Borden. Mrs. Borden was murdered in the same room where Uncle John had spent the night. That was the guest bedroom up on the 2nd floor. Lizzie claimed that she was in the water closet. That would be the toilet, which was in the basement. And as she came up the cellar stairs, Bridget was running out the side door past her, vomiting. I think Bridget knew that Mrs. Borden had been slain. Either Uncle John told her, and she got instantly ill. She was headed out back for the pear orchard and to clear her head. And Lizzie said, what's the matter? And of course, there'd been sickness in the house the days before. But the murder of Mrs. Borden was on the second floor. And at that time, Lizzie would have been in the basement. And I don't know that she would have heard anything. She was not in the house when Mr. Borden was slain. She was out in the, and of course the police said that was the hottest day of the year. She couldn't be up in the, nobody could be up there. But they have witnesses. A witness is by a young guy who was 14 years old. Only name you see in the witness report is a guy named Brownie. Brownie said he was up in the loft before the police got there. They didn't secure the scene. There wasn't enough police officers. So people are wandering around. They were in the barn. They were up the stairs. They were in the house. And preservation of evidence is important. Yes?
Is there a story about maybe Lizzie picking up something at the chemist?
Oh, okay. It is claimed that Lizzie, on the day before, went to a local pharmacy not too far from her house and asked to buy prussic acid. And the guy on duty, who was not a pharmacist but was on duty, a guy by the name of Eli Bentz, said, no, you can't buy prussic acid without a prescription. What do you want to do with that? Well, I have a mink stole and it has an infestation and I want to use prussic acid on it. And so Eli Bentz thought nothing of it. And the next day was the murders. Eli Bentz's brother was on the police department. So he called him up. He said, you know, there was a woman in here yesterday who wanted to buy prussic acid. He says, do you know who she was? No. Do you think you could identify her? Maybe. So they picked him up, Eli Bentz. They took him over to the Borden house. Now it's 8 o'clock at night. It's on August 4th. No daylight savings time, right? That was before that. So it's pretty dark out. Kerosene lamps. Why didn't Mr. Borden have electricity? No one had electricity. They didn't have electricity in that part of Fall River. It was either gas or kerosene. And a lot of people didn't like gas because gas goes boom. And it didn't smell back then like it smells that. That smell you smell in gas is not what gas smells like. They put that in so you know that there's a leak. So badly lit kitchen. He said, well, maybe if she talked. So they had these people talk and he said, you know what, that could be her. That might be her. Fast forward a couple of days, inquiry. He said, did you have a woman come in? Yes. Do you know who it was? Yes, it was Andrew Borden's daughter. Fast forward, preliminary hearing a month later. Do you recognize the woman who came in? Oh yes, it was Lizzie Borden. I've known her for a while. Grand jury, do you know who it was? Oh yes, it was Lizzie Borden. She was a customer of mine when I was at a such and such a pharmacy 10 years ago. So it went from he didn't know her till he practically dated her. And when it came time for court, now there were 3 judges. Lizzie had a dream team for her attorneys. One was the former governor of Massachusetts, a guy by the name of Robinson. 2 of the guys on the bench, 2 of the 3 judges on the bench, he had appointed when he was governor. And he said, you can't ask this guy about poison. There's no indication that these people were poisoned. They had the report from Harvard that said there was no poison in the stomachs. So you can't even use that evidence. So they had Bentz on the stand. Bentz is buried over in Bridgewater, by the way, not too far from here. And they had him on the stand. He gave his name. The defense said, "We object," and the court would not let him testify. That never came out in court. I, lucky enough, have a glass, a little small drinking glass that says Bentz's Pharmacy on it. He moved from Fall River up to the western part of the state and became a pharmacist and had a pharmacy up there. Anybody else? Yes.
Why did the jury vote to acquit?
The jury voted to acquit, and it didn't take them very long. And incidentally, it was said that after this was over, they presented Lizzie with a picture of the jury, all the men in the jury. First of all, they didn't think a woman was capable of that kind of violence. That was one of the things. And the fact that there was no evidence, there was no blood evidence. They found no blood. There should have been blood everywhere. They took the door frame around the door where Mr. Borden had where the couch, the sitting couch where he was. They had that in court with all the blood stains on it. There should have been blood all over somebody, but they couldn't find any dresses, and they hunted high and low. There were 3 different searches. As I told you, one on Thursday, one on Friday, one during the funeral, and then the following Monday. Did they have it out for Lizzie? Yeah, one of the reasons was, you know how everybody lawyers up? Well, Lizzie did more than that. She hired a private detective firm. And you probably all heard of it, Pinkerton. And they were a big-time outfit in 1892. The Fall River Police Department went bonkers. What is she doing bringing in? They hired their own private detective, a guy by the name of McHenry from Providence. His job was to watch the guy from Pinkerton. And they paid him. The city of Fall River paid McHenry. McHenry got involved in a reporter for the Globe, the Boston Globe. Interesting name for a reporter. His name was Tricky. And maybe you've heard of the Tricky McHenry. McHenry paid Tricky for information. Tricky paid McHenry for information. And the information was that Lizzie was pregnant. And the Boston Globe printed that. And then, of course, had to retract it. Tricky lost his job. McHenry went back with another $500, plus what the city of Fall River had paid him, went back. He made out pretty well. That's the Tricky McHenry incident. Yes?
What happened to John Morse?
Poor Uncle John. Uncle John testified for the prosecution. When Lizzie was found not guilty, she walked free. He went downstairs to collect his witness fee because he was a witness for the prosecution. They said, how far did you have to travel to get here? He said, well, I came from Hastings, Iowa, and that is, they said, wait a minute. You came from there, but you were here when all this happened. Where were you living when this happened? Well, over in Westport. So they gave him $3.75. He left town. He never came back. Never came back to Fall River. He lived till he was 79 years old. He died out in Iowa, Hastings. Bridget Sullivan wound up in Montana. She got married. Guess what her husband's last name was? Sullivan. So she didn't have to change the monogram on her towels because Sullivan, but he was no relation. And she died in 1947. So that shows you how recent this was. We think of it as being 134 years ago, but some of it goes forward. I know where I was in 47. I think I was teaching school.
Was there any news about why Mrs. Borden was in John's room on the other side of the bed?
She was cleaning it. She was fixing up the bed, tidying up the bed. He slept in the bed that night and she was cleaning it up. He had left the premises, but I believe he came back. Whether he forgot something, whether he left his cummerbund there or his implement that he always carried. I think they had words. It was face to face. Yes.
So you were saying that the butcher, John guy, used to write with Emma, that they were closer than he was closer with
Yes.
her?
And
so how is Emma's relationship with the father and with her sister?
Pretty well until 1905. They lived at number 92 2nd Street. After Lizzie was acquitted, they moved to the hills section of Fall River, which is, and it was on French Road. Had this house there. Lizzie called it Maplecroft. It's still there. The word Maplecroft is still in the cement in the front steps. Lizzie and Emma lived there together until 1905. They had a falling out. Emma never returned. Lizzie stayed in Fall River for the rest of her life. Emma went to Providence, finally wound up in Newmarket, New Hampshire. Now, you got to remember that they're 9.5 years apart, yet they died within a week of each other. Lizzie from gallbladder surgery, complications of gallbladder surgery, and Emma passed away from a fall where she broke her hip. And of course, back then, falling and breaking your hip was like a death sentence. Pneumonia set in, and so they passed away within a week of each other. Lizzie passing away first. Any other questions? Yes. Yes.
Any idea how old she was in this photo?
Yes, she was about 30 years old when that was taken.
Okay.
And the crime occurred when she was 32.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to respectfully poke at the Uncle John theory first.
Uncle John.
First, so I believe the book says that he left, and Lizzie spoke to Abby after he left. So we know he didn't kill Abby and then leave. So he would have had to leave, come back, and kill her,
Yes.
and clean up or whatever, and then leave,
Yes.
and then sneak back in
Yes.
to kill Mr. Borden. So a lot of that seems really risky, and lucky that he would have got away with all that without anyone seeing or hearing him come back in. So, first of all, how would he have known that Mr. Borden was going to come home sick?
Well, he didn't come home sick.
Okay, thought he didn't feel well.
He didn't
so
feel well, but he did his morning, that was his morning ritual.
Okay.
And he was usually back about 10:30, 11.
Okay, and so what would have been the motive? Because I don't believe he would have inherited
First
any
of
of
all,
it,
no, he
right?
wouldn't
Okay.
have. I think the initial motive was anger. He got upset at Mrs. Borden. They didn't get along. That's noted that they didn't get along. There is rumors that I did not write in my book, but there's rumors out there that are in other books that she suspected that Uncle John and Bridget Sullivan were an item, and she was not happy about it. So much so that she insisted that he sleep in the guest bedroom on the second floor using the front stairway instead of using the spare bedroom on the third floor as he usually did. And that's where Bridget's bed was located, on the third floor. I got time for about 1 or 2 more questions.
Depends on the money.
Mr. Borden's money? Mr. Borden's money went directly to Emma and to Lizzie. They were the beneficiaries. And this conjecture what if Mrs. Borden had died second? Then there would have been heirs, and that's true. But I don't know that anybody planned that out that way. But all the money went to them. Lizzie ran the businesses, the rental properties, and shared it with Emma. Continued to share it with Emma after she moved. We're kind of on a time budget. So one more question.
I've heard that the defense attorneys still have information about the trial that they had with Lizzie that has not been released.
Yeah. Attorney Knowlton, you mean?
I don't.
Yeah, that was the DA at the time. I think that most of that has been released. He kept a lot of the things in a hip bath. I don't know if anybody, I don't ever remember a hip bath, but before there was tubs and things like that, people would bathe in a tub, copper tub. It was called a hip bath. And District Attorney Knowlton had all of his notes, and they said he kept it in that container because it was safe. But that had been released probably 20 years ago.
How about what her defense attorney, her attorneys, do they still have information that hasn't?
I don't think so. So I do have copies of the Lizzie book. I also have copies of my football book, if anybody's interested. Special price for tonight, so you don't have to avoid the shipping and all of that. It would be $20 for either one of them. If anybody's interested, I'll inscribe it to you or to anybody else. Or if you want it left blank, you can re-gift it to somebody. But first of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank the library committee for inviting me to be here tonight. It's so good to come home. I spent so many hours in this building when I was in junior high and high school, and it is so good to come home. When I used to come here, there was a room upstairs where we could, like a round table with about 6 or 8 chairs, and I could look out the window and I could see my house on North Avenue. So that's how close I am to the library, or was at the time. But thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I could go another hour.